Well, I would like to welcome everyone to the third episode of the Commissaire Commentaries podcast. We are glad to be back after a short hiatus, after a busy summer, busy fall, and leading up to the end of the North American cyclocross season. So, this will be a podcast by USA Cycling for officials, riders, and the cycling community as a whole. We're here to discuss various cycling and officiating topics and explore who our officials are, why they do what they do, and what we can all continue to do to help our program grow and thrive. So this is the second of 3 parts of a mini series called Safe, Fair, and Fun. Today is fairness. We covered safety last time with Dave Folks, and now we're here to do fairness.
It's my privilege to welcome our guest today, Chuck Hodge, and he's here to discuss a really tricky topic. That's why we picked him on fairness. Just a quick biography about Chuck. Many of you know him from his latest role at USA Cycling as the chief of racing. He was responsible to manage national championships, the race calendar, sanctioning, director support, LA services, and officiating. Prior to that, Chuck was organizing and managing some of the largest races and fun rides in United States. I think Derek Bouchard Hall, the former CEO, mentioned it best. He said that Chuck Hodge is the most respected individual in American bike racing, with decades of experience in our sport in many different roles: racer, event promoter, and as an official. On the officiating side, Chuck is an awesome international commissaire on the road discipline. He's officiated 30 years. He's worked at all levels, from the local level to the Olympics. He served on the USA Cycling and UCI officiating commissions that were responsible for rules, officiating policies, training, education, etc. For me personally, I just want to spend a brief moment to thank Chuck for being a very positive influence in my officiating career. I really look up to him throughout many moments, and in my time as an official, he's been really supportive of everything that I do. So thank you, Chuck. And before we get into the meat of the podcast, we'll start with some brief warm-up questions for you. Marcy, go ahead.
So Chuck, what is your officiating origin story?
I think, like a lot of people, I wasn't a very good bike racer.
Yep.
I raced starting when I was probably 15, 16-year-old on the mountain bike, raced track, road, mountain bike. And I just got to that Cat 1 level on the road and wasn't going to go any further. And at the same time, I started to ride motorcycles a bit, and the motor ref stuff looked cool to me. So things just came together really well. And that's, I think, like a lot of you, my origin story. I started out as a racer.
Awesome. Yeah, that is one of the top, though. We still have to keeping a tally, Ryan, so we can make some statistics on where do our officials come from. So Chuck is an ex-racer. All right. So you led and oversaw USA Cycling's officiating department during a number of years. And there was a lot going on at different points, with taking over as USA Cycling's technical director, being there for the changeover with several different CEOs, and then our once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. So with all that and different goals that you had while you were there, what are some changes you created in the officiating landscape?
I want to point out, I don't think it was just me, but one reason I took the job before I came in 2015, I think the officials were in a very difficult spot working with the national governing body. At the time, I got asked to be the president of the technical commission, not as a USA Cycling staff member. I think really for me, just bringing some respect back to what officials do for the event organizers and the organization was very important. That was not just me. Derek Bouchard Hall, who was our CEO at the time, had a lot to do with that, as well as other staff there. To me, that's really, I think, what I'm most proud of. There's a lot of little tactics, but to me, I think it symbolized we now have an officials Hall of Fame in the lobby at USA Cycling, and that would not have happened 10 years ago. So for me, things like that are really important. And officials have a very important part in the sport and have helped it grow and help it continue to grow and be what it is, fair, and deserve some credit for that.
Absolutely, yeah. And I would absolutely say that is a difference that I have felt in, the past number of years as an official is the uh, greater amount of collaboration with the organizers and all stakeholders at a race feels so much more like teamwork than I think it did, maybe 15 years ago.
Okay, Chuck. Last icebreaker question. Okay, this is we don't get the fun episode, but what's one fun fact people should know about you that are afraid to ask?
Fun fact,
Yes.
put me on the spot there. I will, I mean, something relatable to what we just talked about was when USA Cycling was looking for a technical director, Derek Bouchard Hall came up to me and said, "Who should I hire?" And I gave him a list of 4 or 5 or 6 names, and he's like, "Your name's not on there." And I said, "No, I'll never work for USA Cycling." And he said, "That's a great start to negotiating." So, I mean, my initial reaction to working for USA Cycling was no, and I really did enjoy my time there, and still continue to work closely with them.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I guess I also would love to see at some point from all of the, say, past technical directors, what the listing is of who said they would never work for USA Cycling.
Yep.
That would be an interesting list. Okay, so on to fairness. So what is your base understanding of fairness, and what are the top qualities of a fair official, and what are some examples of officials who have exuded that fairness, and what sort of things they've done at events?
Yeah, I thought quite a bit about it when you all asked me to cover the topic. I think we look at fairness from a number of perspectives. How an official can be fair, I think, is probably what you all are talking about. But some of it is that rule fair? Is that call that an official made fair? Is it fair that all of our road national championships have a hill in them, and fat sprinters like me can't win them? It's just there. In fairness, the perception of fairness changes for all of us all the time. And what I think want to address today is what makes a fair official. I think that's what you are looking for. And I'd really start out with that by saying officials really need to. One thing when I was with the organization, really wanted to cover a bit was all our inherent biases. And this isn't just race or sex or anything else, gender or anything else. It's we all have biases built in. Someone with hairy legs couldn't have won that road race, or that skinny guy couldn't have won that sprint competition. We all have these built-in biases. I think the first part of being a fair official is realizing that you have those. It's just human nature, and recognizing that and dealing with that. And day to day, just all these little things we deal with out in the world is understanding that and recognizing it is important.
Do you feel like your application of fairness has changed over time as an official? Perhaps, maybe being stricter to start out with, more lax to start out with, or any other sorts of changes you've felt or seen?
Yeah, I actually pondered that question. I was working a race just a few weeks ago in South America, and I tend to be, as an ex-racer, probably a little more forgiving of athletes than others. I don't necessarily think that's fair because other commissaires are maybe a little tougher than I am sometimes. But having been in these positions often, sometimes it's tough. But I thought about that quite a bit. I think I've maybe gotten a bit stricter and a little less forgiving. And some of that is just the level I tend to work at now is a little bit higher. I think we'll talk about it in a bit, but I think treating a beginning athlete or an athlete who's new to our sport a little differently doesn't mean you're being unfair. It's an understanding of the rules and where they're coming from and the level they're competing at as well. But I would say I've probably actually gotten a little stricter, and especially at the level I deal with a lot now, it's you are playing in this very elite level now, and you need to understand the regulations and abide by the regulations.
Mhm.
And even if you're a club team doing a UCI race, you need to understand the playing field you're playing at. You need to abide by the rules.
Definitely. And I think you kind of started to cover this, but even now, do you feel like you have different criteria applying fairness between different race categories depending on the type of event you're at, whether it's a UCI race or a local race?
Yeah, I mean, again, just an example from a couple weeks ago, we are doing a relatively small women's race in Ecuador, just very few riders. Probably half the teams there had never driven in a caravan before, and we opened feeding up, and the field was really small. Team manager just arrives right past me as Com one, right up in the field and feeds his rider. And he just, I mean, he should know that's something that's sort of in the rules, hard to explain, but in that case, it would have been really easy to just issue a fine. But I had a conversation with him after the race,
Mm-hmm.
and explained how things work. And I think he truly, honestly, just didn't understand. That to me was a much more effective remedy to the situation than my poor Spanish translation of the UCI regulation with a whacking them with a huge fine. To me, that was an appropriate response to that. We're at a high level race, but you have someone who's never done it before. When you start to look at novice racers and people who are in it for the first time, I mean, the classic example is someone's got their number pinned on wrong, or someone who's wearing a yellow Tour de France yellow jersey in a novice road race. There are ways that we as officials can handle that, where we are explaining and fixing the situation for the future, but doing it in a way that doesn't drive people away from the sport. And you can't tell me, I'm sorry, that finding someone for having the number on wrong versus going and having an explanation, helping them pin it, one is not fairer than the other, but one will definitely drive someone away from the sport a lot quicker and be a negative interaction. So I think there always has to be that feel for how to handle a situation and resolve it in a way that satisfies the sporting aspect of the sport and also has the best overall outcome for everybody.
Chuck, that example that you mentioned with that Ecuador team, I'm sure you heard about this concept. I'm going to butcher this in German. It's called finger spitzenfil.
Mhm.
And that's a concept that we generally learn in the higher category races. Anything that you want to add or share other examples or even define it yourself? What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, really, that was developed by that term came from Martin Swinkles, who's one of my mentors and just retired this year as international commissaire. Really admire him. And, the funny story there, talking about fairness, is a little bit of an aside with Martin, and I'll come back to that, is when I was thinking about becoming international commissaire, I had the good fortune to go down and attend the Tour Down Under, and Martin was the president there. And I asked him, emailed him and said, hey, can I sit down with you and talk about, the future? And we had a good talk, and we started talking about fairness. And the one thing that really sticks out with me is Martin's like, I know them all, but in the end, they're all numbers. And, we joke about that here, but he's like, it's so important that you treat these riders the same. And to me, that's the, ultimate of fairness. Now, how do you treat them the same? So getting back to your question of, this is the same guy who says you have to have a feel for the sport. What I tell new officials is you're never going to get in trouble for following the regulations. And generally, the regulations are there for a reason. They've been honed over the years, and part of fairness is equitable application of the regulations. There are times to know when to apply them and when not to. And I think that's a very difficult thing for you to get a good feel for over the years. Again, I've been a little more probably lenient over the years than I probably should be, but great example I think we'll talk about is someone's long hair covering a race number. It's like they go across the line a minute ahead of everybody else, and the camera person or judge can't get the number, but everybody knows who the rider is. are you going to whack that rider? Is that fair? If you follow the rule exactly, yeah, you will, but I don't think that's the right thing to do. So that little bit of feel there. Now it gets really, really difficult sometimes about when you let a rider draft a car, how long you let that sticky bottle happen for, whether you, talking about judgment calls, how to handle a really sketchy field sprint and riders interacting. Those are all really tough things to do. And I think where we as commissaires and officials get whacked a lot by the riders is that, one official penalized this last week and you're not doing it this week. And how is that fair? And that consistency thing is tough. So
before we get to consistency, you mentioned about regulations, and that's part of what officials have to do, enforce the regulations. What are some regulations that you think we are doing pretty well on? Let's just take nationally that
Yep.
you feel you've observed, and overall we do a pretty good job here.
Yeah, I think things that the last 10 years being working around the country and also working at USA Cycling, some things I think we've done well are things like the centerline rule. I think we really spent a lot of time working up the videos you all have probably seen, which are getting dated now, but working to provide a tool to showcase consistency across the country, I think is one that we've done really well with. Things like just wearing the helmet. It sounds so basic to us now these days, but 10 or 15 years ago when I was racing, you'd see guys out there without helmets all the time. And I'm not saying scream at people in the parking lot, but when was the last time you even thought about seeing someone out on the field to play without a helmet? It just does not happen anymore. Some of that's officiating and some of that is just the culture of the sport has changed. But right there's two things I think we have seen a really good and dramatic change in over the last few years. And some of that's been through a lot of training and a real focus on national consistency.
Okay, Chuck, what about the flip side? What are things that we could do to improve on some of the regulations? You're saying we're not doing a good job.
Yeah. I don't think there's one specific rule, but it's more of the judgment call type of things. And to be blunt, what I think we saw a lot is brand new officials trying to really overthink things and being put in a difficult position. Maybe your first chief position, maybe one of two or three officials at a race, and making a call that was very much a judgment call or going way outside the bounds, not necessarily understanding the regulation and how to apply it. And I call those the Monday morning phone call or the Monday morning email, and we had a lot of them. But I will tell you, at my time at USA Cycling, I think Bonnie's got the same philosophy now, is that if an official makes the right call and the rider's unhappy, we will back that official up. The problem was always when an official made a call that we looked at and said it just wasn't a good call. I've done that myself. I've been on the receiving end, unfortunately, doing the same thing, but it's a lot harder to defend an official. The other issue, the fairness issue of that is that the right thing to do? And those calls 50% of the time, or emails, they just weren't fair. It wasn't fair to me. The perception of fairness amongst participants blows me away sometimes, because their perception of fairness is much different than mine. But it's a lot easier to, I think, defend consistency and calls that were within the regulations. So I don't think there's one thing, Ryan, but that I can really think of off the top of my head, but it's more of these judgment call type situations. Probably the only thing that's close is, because it's such a judgment call, is relegations and sprints in road events. We had a lot of people, and it seemed to track whenever big riders got thrown out of the Tour de France. When it happened, over the next month or two, you'd see people getting relegated in sprints. And then, 6 different videos from 6 different angles would come into the office. So, yeah. Another one I think that's really been a hot topic over the last few months is application of discipline when there's an issue. And we had some real issues at criteriums this year. And that is as much a USA Cycling suspension investigation process as it is on the ground. But, how come someone can throw a punch in this race and get a week suspension, and then I bump someone in this race and get 2 months suspension? So that's one that's been a real struggle as well.
On that note, I am curious about, those difficult decisions when you or someone else makes a tricky decision. And have you ever had to rescind a decision, or how would you recommend that an official deals with it when they might make an unfair call and realize it later?
Yeah, we actually did a session at a summit a few years ago. I'd really recommend people go back and watch. It was with Andy McCordner, Landis Tyson, and Justin Evans, and it was mistakes we've made is what we called it, and it was oh my gosh, I screwed up. I mean, probably the biggest one I've been involved with was I was on the jury when the 3K rule at Tour California was moved to 3.5K. That was super controversial, and I was on the periphery of that one. I've actually reversed calls before, and to me, there's a time when you can't do it. I mean, if racing has started the next day and you've made a call that impacts that, to me, it's sort of like, the baseball game when the next play starts, it's done. But there's certainly been times. I mean, one was one of my first chief positions, and it was a small stage race. And I specifically told the chief judge, because this was a very flat race, that I talked to one of the teams, and they said, yeah, we'll intel, we're going to drive it, and we're going to create some gaps in the field. And they said, we want to ensure you are going to start the time again if there's a 1 second gap. I said, yeah, that's how we do it. Specifically talked to the chief judge about it, and just counted on him, and sure enough, they drove it and ended up opening almost a 2 second gap in the middle of the field. I didn't realize it because I didn't pay attention, but chief judge gave everybody by the same time, and it really was going to impact results. And the results had gone out, and I caught it luckily before the team did, but we went and reprinted results. I sent a communique out and just said this. I actually, to be honest, I called one of my mentors up and said, this just happened. And they said, okay, you talk to this team, and this team's going to come up to you possibly and say, I want to see the film. And can you defend this on the film after you said you were going to do it? I said, nope. So then you're going to change it, aren't you? And we did. Middle of the night, we're making new copies. We communicated it out and had new copies at the start the next day. So to me, that was the right and fair thing to do. Is we had said we were doing this, someone had had a lapse of judgment, and we caught it in time and we fixed it. Now, if we'd started the race the next day, that wouldn't have changed. But yeah, that's one example. There have probably been a few more over the years that before the stage the next day, for instance, in a stage race, I've changed my mind on something or seen new information that has caused us to reevaluate.
Yeah, no, that's great to know, and I think that reminding our entire community of everyone does make a mistake, and that it's more about applying that fairness when you have that new information and following it up as much as you can is some really great example and advice.
And yeah, I think I walked away from that super worried about, oh my gosh, how's this going to be perceived? I think I walked away with more respect from the teams for making that decision than otherwise.
So then when we talk about all that additional information that you might get after the fact, what sort of changes have technology made for making decisions and increasing fairness, or being a disadvantage for us making those calls?
Yeah, I think it's that's probably the biggest change I've seen in the last, since I've been officiating, is the proliferation of cameras, especially. I mean, there's one issue, which is the whole dialogue about what idiots officials are after the fact, on Monday morning, and that goes across sport. But it's just everyone's got a camera in their pocket. And to give you an idea, when I started out, I mean, we filmed that centerline video that people have done the motor I've seen we have a big camera and we're holding it up off a motorcycle and having to bring it back and edit it on a machine. You can do all that with your phone in your pocket now. And everybody's got that phone. I think it brings some challenges and it brings some opportunity. On one hand, it gives us more tools to make more informed decisions than we've ever done before. And there have been some investigations this summer that have really, we've been able to see what really happened with footage that has come from GoPros or cameras on the side of the road. And I think that is a huge bone. Talk about fairness of being able to make the right decision because you have evidence. The negative is some of this stuff shows up a day or two later. And it shows up on social media, and by the time you find it, you've started the next day. We've had situations where we've made very well-informed decisions based on everything we have, using all the materials we have, and you make the decision, and then you see something, and you're like, maybe I was right, maybe I wasn't. And sometimes I think it's relatively rare, but we've had some that's like, God, that was just the wrong call. And we just didn't have the data to make the right decision. I think that happens a lot more when we don't make a call, and then you see something, it's like, why didn't you? Got holding onto a car or whatever. I had a funny one. I mean, to tell you, I was in Guatemala working last year and finished up the stage, no problems. At dinner that night, one of the race staff comes up and says, "You got to see this," and it's some Central American social media site, and it's one of the riders who got dropped holding onto a van for like kilometers, and they put little theme music to it, and kicked him out of the race the next morning. Told his manager I needed to see, and he was done.
Right.
But that we could have seen that a week later. The guy could have won a stage. So in that case, that technology allowed me to make a call that was right. I mean, that rider could have won stage 2 stages later, and he only made time cut because he was holding on the band. So it's a mixed, it's a dual-edged sword, the technology. But I would encourage officials to utilize that. To me, there's nothing wrong with using whatever footage is there. Just realize that I've seen the same incident from 2 angles and what's completely different in both. So, but yeah, I think using whatever technology is out there is helpful.
Chuck, this question I think mostly for newer officials or places where you don't have that technology. This is a classic dilemma where, well, I didn't see it, so it didn't happen, right?
Yep.
And so how do you deal with that from an officiating perspective?
Yeah, it is. If you're going to whack someone, I'll say for something that no one saw, you better have some darn good evidence. Like they got dropped, 100 miles before they came through a timing point 20 minutes down and they finished 10 seconds behind the leader. I mean, come on, something's going on there. I've had a few very high profile situations I've been in where I am pretty sure a rider got some type of advantage, either sitting on a car when they shouldn't have or getting pushed or something, and I couldn't get them on it. And one of them was very high profile, the very high profile rider in their home country, and it was like national hero kind of stuff. And I went and asked around, and there was a little bit of reticence to answer my questions, but I couldn't get what I needed. And I talked to another manager. He's like, "There's no way he made it back how he did when the field was going 60K an hour." I said, "Well, did you see anything?" He said, "No." I said, "Anybody notice anything?" "No." "Well, can't do anything." So for me, if you're going to ping someone, you need some pretty strong corroborating evidence if you didn't see it yourself. I think that's fair. And there are some sneaky bike racers out there, I can tell you that. So.
Okay, well, go to the next topic area. This is about you being either new chief referee or you're going to a new race at some country. How do you set fairness to those on the crew members, right? You may not never work with them. You don't know how they're gonna make judgments. How do you go in and level set everybody? And then if you're a new crew member, what should I expect from Chuck as the PCP to tell me what I need to do to make sure I can follow your idea of fairness at an event?
Yeah, and a lot of times there's a language issue in there as well. I mean, I've just come back from 2 races in South America, and my Spanish is okay, but not great. So I think the first thing is just communication with the crew and being approachable. I walk into this race in Ecuador a couple weeks ago, don't know a soul at the race. And here comes the American international commissaire, and they don't have an international commissaire in the whole country, but building that rapport very, very quickly with the team. And the ways I generally do that when I'm working with the crew is they work locally and I don't. So how do you handle this? Who do I need to watch out for? What about this? What about this course? And let them contribute to helping make the race successful. The other thing is, aside from the pre-event commissaire meeting, is we are going to meet at the stage after the stage finishes, and I need you to give me anything major that happened. It's also setting guidelines. And I told the crew down there, there are some things that we disqualify for. Great example, rider holding onto a car. If rider's holding onto a car going up a mountain, they're done as far as I'm concerned. But just told them, I want to be the one that makes that decision, that you tell me and I make the decision, because you can't unwind that kind of thing. So it's really, to me, involvement with the crew and letting them know sort of what's important to you, having that open dialogue and having your team know that they can come to you as the president at any time, and also empowering the crew to make some decisions and come to you with information. I think those are all super important.
Yeah, absolutely. That communication and just setting those expectations and having the conversation to start out with is so much greater for that shared understanding. And I think you're right about that being a really effective way to share that vision with your entire crew.
Yeah, and Marcy, to add on, I think there's an education component that officials, not just top officials, but officials moving around the country or internationally. The example I'll give you is this race I worked had a UCI women's component, but then they had U23 men and junior men as well, and the crew was doing it. So at night we were sitting down doing results. I was sitting down with them, and they were working on their stuff, and they asked me, they had an issue in the U23 men's race where there was a bike exchange not between riders on the same team. And I'm showing them, they follow the UCI rules. I'm showing them the statute and the penalty. And it's a pretty significant time penalty. And we're at 6 o'clock at night. The race finished at noon.
Oh.
And this was, I think, a great training opportunity for them. And I just said, listen, you're about to send a 2-minute penalty out to the guy who's sitting second overall in the race via WhatsApp at 7 o'clock at night with no ability for him to come and say anything. And this is not a best practice. And I said, this is why we meet right after the stage. And we discuss those so we can pull the party in, and you can at least go to the team and rider and say what happened and then make a decision. And I think that's fair. It's not really fair to hit someone with a 2-minute penalty in the middle of the night, and because odds are you're going to be having a long discussion the next day. So, and they were nodding their heads like, yeah, we just don't work stage races here. That makes sense, and next time we'll do that. So it's a good learning opportunity for everybody.
Another thing that I think has probably been a big change in the outlook between riders, organizers, officials in your tenure at USAC is the addition of the customer service part of our whole process. And that absolutely didn't used to be a thing, and has been introduced, and I think is a really important part of us retaining and recruiting new riders, new officials, everybody. How do you balance fairness and with ruling on regulations and being the correct amount strict, or an appropriate amount strict, with still providing that top-notch customer service to riders?
I mean, listen, everybody's your customer there. So just because you're being nice to one person by not penalizing them doesn't mean you're being nice to everybody else. I mean, if someone breaks a rule, customer service means you're doing the right thing for all your customers. So, as an example, you have someone holding on to a team car, throw them out of the bike race. That's what's fair and good customer service to everyone else in that bike race.
Yep.
I mean, I'll give you an example. I was working as a motor ref in a local race, and I finished my race, and I was going out to the Pro 1-2 road race. There was one other motor commissaire with it, and it's done early, so I'm going to go out and help on the last lap. And so I go, the race is coming the way I go, I turn around, there's a break. He goes up the break, and the field had thought they had lost their motor ref. He was up at the break. Two guys in the back. I mean, they went from the back all the way across the road, across the center line, all the way up the far side of the road, back into the lane, attacking, trying to catch his break on the last lap. They know I was there. I went up, whistled them, DQ'd them, threw them out of the race right there. And the field applauded, So that was customer service. It was customer service for the other 60 guys, who were getting, it wouldn't have been fair situation. So I think customer service is also just a lot about listening. And I knew a commissaire once whose idea of doing penalties was to write everything in the communique and never look at a rider or manager. And that's not right. You need to, if you're going to penalize someone, you need to have the guts to tell them to their face. And we've had to tell people they're not national champions anymore. So those are tough things, but there's a way to do it in a way that is respectful to people, not screaming, not yelling, and is respectful to people. I consider that good customer service as well. But I think it's a hugely important thing. The UCI does they don't call it customer service, but during the IC exam I took, we spent a whole day on working with other entities and understanding the stresses of teams and organizers and everyone else out there, and how to be empathetic and sympathetic while also doing what you need to do as a commissaire. And I think that's a hard to develop skill sometimes.
Definitely. And I can strongly relate to your comment about doing what's fair for everybody, helping to make those calls. I think that when I was a little younger and still figuring out how to have a backbone, that was a really important part for me to think about, of I'm being unfair if I don't call somebody on something right now.
Yep, for sure. I mean, listen, I got screamed and yelled at by, if I told you the name, I'll tell you this, he's worn a yellow jersey before. Just screamed and yelled at because I was making him follow a rule in the Olympic road race. It was the fair and right thing to do. And, I think you take him out of that race and he would understand and know that. But boy, talk about getting screamed at up and down. I got to find that TV footage. I don't think it actually made it on the live TV, but you thought I was in the middle. So, no, you can't follow that team car for 10 kilometers on the bumper. That's rare. I mean, that really is. I think you garner a lot more respect by having fair conversations involving the stakeholders than you do by putting your name on a piece of paper and sending it out via email at night.
Yeah, it all takes a lot of guts. Definitely. So we've been talking mostly about fairness with officials applying the rules. Are there certain thoughts you have on best practices and guidance as officials are treating organizers fairly, or treating just race days fairly, and what that might mean to you?
Sure. Yeah. To me, I think it's all about communication. I saw Ryan put in the notes. I did a I got asked years ago to do, it's actually 2 webinars. I think they recorded both. One was I did it, the official summit, and it was the race director, chief referee relationship. And I did it the race director summit and called it the same thing, but basically flipped all the slides. To me, it's all about communication. And a buddy of mine likes to say, surprises are great at Christmas, surprises are great on your birthday, surprises are not good on race day. And that runs from something the race director's done that you show up and say, what the heck, to them getting a bill for something they had no idea they were going to get a bill about. I think it's communication. It's just having a good open dialogue. And sometimes that's hard. I mean, we've all had that organizer who is just non-responsive to you. On the other hand, I mean, empathy and sympathy, some of these races are run by volunteers who have 60-hour-a-week jobs and are doing this on the side and trying to do it for all the right reasons. And how much you want to help and empower that situation is a sort of individual decision. But I think having communication is number one. Couple best practices. One is go in knowing about their bike race. I had a very difficult situation 2 weeks ago where I was assigned to a race in South America on Friday that started the next Wednesday. It was an emergency appointment. I was able to get enough information Friday night to book my ticket over the weekend, but got no communication from the organizer, including no technical guide, until I got on the plane Tuesday morning to head down to South America. But what I did do was called a buddy of mine who I knew had raced down there. I looked on their website. I looked on Facebook. I knew the courses. So I took enough time to get enough general information about the race. Knew it was a first-year race. It had been a local race the year before. Here's some stuff about the town. Here's where the courses are. Got on Google Earth over the weekend because I had the courses from their Facebook page and looked at the roads. Just learned as much as I could about the race. And I think go into a race knowing how expect the organizer, knowing about the race, knowing their flyer, knowing their schedule, that type of stuff is hugely important. The other big one is just making them aware of what requirements they're going to have for paying officials, what that invoice looks like. No one wants that surprise of the big bill. It's a lot more palatable if it can come ahead of time. And I've got a checklist of things that I ask organizers as we develop the relationship. A lot of that'll come in the tech guide for a big race, but what's your medical? Who's doing your timing? In foreign countries, do you know who the Commissaire crew is from the host country? Just this whole list of things. I don't hit them all at once with that. It's just a checklist I've got and I've sort of developed over the years. It's relatively informal. So, but yeah, to me, that's real critical stuff to having a successful race for everybody.
You mentioned one thing about the surprise bill, right? I'm going to try to go in on the local association level in terms of we have organizers that might be cost sensitive, right? And there's always this dilemma, right? How much should we bring in the number of officials versus fewer officials, right? And so how do we do better with treating organizers fairly in terms of the staffing levels of officials?
Yep. And Ryan, I think, where I've had success for that, not even as an official, but working for USA Cycling, I mean, that was a constant complaint, especially amongst mountain bike, as we have tried to bring more mountain bike races on. They are successfully running these events without officials. Where I've had some success, I got a complaint from and we sat down and said, okay, let's talk about what you need. We ended up with, when I sat with the organizer and said, okay, we need a chief official to oversee. Do you agree with that? Yeah, I agree. Okay, we need a chief judge to work with your timing company. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I got that. Okay, we need an assistant because while the chief judge doing this, he said, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. Okay, out on the field of play, you have a pit, so we really need, do we agree we need an official in the pit? Kept this exercise. We ended up with one more official that he thought we needed than was assigned. So I think it is again, communication. It is explaining and working with the organizer on what is needed and why it's needed, and do you want to run a fair race or not? Someone told me once that a game or a race without an official is just practice, and I think there's some precedent, and some of it's safety as well. Having a motor ref with the road race field, you feel you're putting 16 masters foaming at the mouth, cat twos out there on a narrow road with no motor ref. Is that a good idea from a safety perspective? And just having that conversation, explanation. Also, don't assign more officials than you need from a local level. I mean, we are at a point now where there's a lot of technology there with chips and cameras and everything else. Do you need 4 officials up on stage scoring anymore? There are times when you may, and that is a great conversation to have with your tell them, hey, do you want the grumpy camera guy to decide actual order of finish? No, that's not a good idea. Okay, well, we probably need a judge there, right? One thing I heard from an LA that I think is true is everyone agrees officials don't get paid enough, and they all agree officials cost too much. So I don't think there's any disrespect for what officials make. It's just one more cost in a sport that unfortunately does not have all the resources it needs sometimes.
Chuck, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about in terms of fairness, or we covered it thoroughly with you?
No, I think we're it's the one thing I would add to this is I don't think it's the officials' place to question the fairness of the regulations. I think I have my equipment rules and how saddle angles, I have my opinions on it, but our job is not to question the fairness of those regulations. Our job is to fairly and equitably apply those regulations.
Yep.
And I think that's where the sort of trouble starts. But I would stress to people it is not a good idea to not apply a rule because you don't agree with it. I mean, we as a community, a cycling family, have generally determined that the regulations are what they are together. And I think where we get into bad situations is when someone says, I just don't think that rule's right and I'm not going to apply it. What's tougher is sometimes when to apply those and those judgment calls. Does this regulation apply or not? Is that the spirit or whatever of where it is? But I'd really stress to officials is you may not like a rule, but they're there to be they're there for a reason. And we as a community have come together to determine what those rules are.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I can't think of a very specific time when I've heard that, but I 100% agree. And I think that also when, like, something that helps when you maybe don't agree with a rule the most or something, but you still need to apply it, is being able to pull up the rule and show it to the rider and say, hey.
Well, I mean, to me,
this is the rule and we're applying it.
To me, Marcy, I mean, one of the examples is the saddle angle rule that the UCI put. I mean, and that was, talk about unfair, I think, and I'll say it. A few years ago, the UCI just decided they were going to start applying it. Always been in the rule book, it never been enforced, and all of a sudden, at big races, people were having to move the nose of their saddle up and down because of this rule. And we got screamed at as commissaires, and I did exactly what you said. I said, this is the rule. I'm doing it exactly like it's supposed to be said. And if you don't like it, you call the UCI. And guess what? The rule changed like a year later. Right. These team organizations have a lot of power.
Yep.
We had a junior rollout, as you two know, for many, many years. And that came up every year about whether we changed it. We did change it because the UCI changed theirs. But that was one that came up every year. And we took community feedback and coaching feedback and other things. This wasn't just a made in a vacuum rule. It was discussed every year. So if there are rules that have issues or need to change, I think teams, organizers, and officials should feel empowered to talk to the proper entity about getting those changed.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
just got a survey from the UCI a couple months ago. They're redoing the fine section, I'll call it, for the road section, and hold all the commissaires. What problems have you had? What good, bad, and ugly? And we're going to take the feedback.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's also great for officials to be able to share that information that, riders, organizers, mechanics, coaches can be transparent with USA Cycling and urge everyone to be active in the community of I am applying this rule here today, and feel free to talk to so and so, USA Cycling, etc. if you'd like to further discuss the meaning behind the rule or whatever it is. But yeah, absolutely.
We'll do one wrap-up question for Chuck. So Chuck, now that you aren't in charge at USA Cycling for the last several months, what are your future plans for the next year and beyond? And what will you be spending your time on?
Yeah, well, one, it's been nice to ride my bike more, which has been great. I've actually had a chance to work more as a commissaire. I was able to work Road Worlds this year. I've been to South America a couple times, and having that flexibility also, I always tried not to assign myself. I never assigned myself, and really when I was there, didn't work as much as a chief official here in the States. So I'm going to look to get back more involved in the race assignment process as a commissaire being assigned rather than assigning. And I'm staying in the event field, so I'm doing some races, technical work on races and rods, and probably see a lot of people at quite a few events next year, but more from the organizational side and a lot of roles. So yeah, it's been good to get away from the 200 email Mondays, and I joke that the job was very difficult in a lot of ways, that a lot of complaints, a lot of problems to solve, but totally loved it. Love the organization. I still do. I was in a meeting today with USA Cycling staff for a few hours, helping out on some things, and we'll continue to do that. So yeah, it was a good part of my life, and really enjoyed it, and looking forward to what comes next.
Yes. Thank you, Chuck. Yes, during when you took over, it was tough times, and you really brought back a lot of confidence within the officiating community. So thank you for doing that. And yes, I think it'll be fun working with you more on the national officiating level. So look forward to doing that. Thank you again, Chuck, for being part of our mini series and sharing all your wisdom today with fairness. We definitely look forward to having you return for future episodes. But to wrap up for the 2023 season, the last episode will be on fun. And so Marcy and I are getting better at the podcast, and we've already selected our next guest for fun. That's not Chuck, although he's in the top 5 of probably one of the more fun officials. But there's somebody definitely better. She is formerly from Missouri, and she relocated to Netherlands about 2 years ago. And she is an official that both Marcy, Chuck, and I would say embodies as a fun official. And we will look forward to exploring that topic more with her in the next few weeks. So for our listeners, if you have any dying questions that you want to ask Sarah about fun, this is your chance. So please make sure to send an email to usac.officials.podcast@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from your feedback, questions, or any suggestions on how we can improve. We definitely want to ask everybody to keep watching the podcast. So far, we've had 2 episodes, and they've only gotten 150 views. So in order for us to keep going and get better, please watch the podcast and give us feedback. And until next time, thank you again for tuning into the Commissaire Commentaries. Thank you.